What's up guys, welcome to this review of Joker, all about the origins of Batman's greatest foe, the Joker, played by Joaquin Phoenix, directed and written by Todd Phillips. It was co-written by Todd Phillips, I should say. What did I think of this film? Well, that's the interesting thing. My thoughts on this film have been changing for the past 2-3 days since I saw the film. In that, while I was watching the first half of the film, I was thinking, you know what, I'm not sure if I like this. Then towards the second half, I was like, this is great. Then I left the film thinking, you know what, I'm still not sure. It's definitely not a bad film. I don't think it's the masterpiece that some people are making it out to be. But I do think it's in the good/great area. I just can't settle on which one I think it is. I think there's a lot to really like about this film, but there's a lot of really nagging little things in this film which are throwing me off a little bit. I do recommend it though. This is a film you have to go see. And one of the reasons I'm having an issue trying to classify my thoughts on this, whether it's good or bad or whatever, is that this is not a fun film. It's not an entertaining film. It's not a film you go to wanting to watch it. And if you are going to this film having already seen it and you want to watch this film again, I have to question why that is, because this is at times a tough film. It's a disturbing film at times because you're essentially watching a character who's mentally ill, who's breaking down in so many ways, in disturbing ways as well, who's clearly having problems, and it's hard to be entertained by seeing someone go through that sort of stuff. Because of the tone of this film, that it is dark, it is serious, it is moody, it can be tough to watch for some people. And I can totally imagine some people not being into this at all, but I think this is a good reflection on what the superhero genre is becoming. I think it's really a good step forward for the superhero genre to show that it isn't all about just heroes coming out saving the day, beating the bad guy. These superhero films can be more than that. They can be more character focused. They don't have to be action films at all. There isn't really any action in this film. A couple of scenes here and there, but really minor action, not action in the sense that it's people fighting or whatever. And because of that, this is not going to be a DC Comics film that everyone's going to be clamoring to see. And of course, it is rated R in America. It's a 15 here in the UK. There is graphic violence in there. Not a huge deal. Nothing too shocking or disturbing or whatever. But the fact that it's there, that's a big thing. It's more about the tone and the mood, how it is dark, how it is somewhat depressing and upsetting at times. That's what really gets it the R rating. And I do think that if you're a sensitive person, if you don't want to see disturbing things, particularly disturbing things happening to people and in society and so on, don't see this film. So to talk on the story in a bit more specifics without going into spoilers just yet, of course it's the origin story of the Joker. Because of that, it's predictable. You know how this film's going to end. You know what the ending is already heading into it. He becomes the Joker. Spoilers, obviously. But that's kind of the main forefront story here. What makes this film good though is when you get deeper into that, what this film's actually about, what this film's actually trying to tell you. All the themes and the messages in this film is what really propels this from being just an origin story of the Joker. And I really like that. Because this film in many ways is a warning. It's a reflection on the time period in which we're in. It's a reflection on American society and culture and American politics at the minute. And I don't want to get too much into film theory here, but it is basically a commentary on the whole debate on gun violence, gun control, the mental health situation, the whole just the health and medical care situation in America. Being in the UK, this stuff doesn't really affect me quite as much. So I imagine that there are going to be a lot of people in America going to see this film, whatever your politics are, and be like, you're either going to agree with the messages that are here, or you're not going to agree at all with the messages that are here. But I feel like this is Todd Phillips basically saying, hey, America, get your act together. It also looks at the way that media influences people, the fact that media can't be reliable. Donald Trump will love it because it's all about like the fake news kind of thing. How much of this is actually real, how much of it is actually happening, how much of it is actually relevant. And it also delves into the divide between the rich and the poor. That's an interesting element of there too. Because it's diving into all these things, I don't think the actual overall message is entirely clear. And I don't think any one of these elements stands out as like, right, it's about gun control, right, it's about the mental health situation. Because they're all there together, because they all touched upon in some way, none of them really stand out above the others, I don't think. And that's a little bit of a problem. Because at the end of the day, if your message isn't being clear, how are we supposed to interpret it? So, yeah, it's a tough one. But get away from the film theory side of things a bit, because that's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. There is a lot of twists and turns in this film. There are surprises in this film. There's a certain twist which really turns everything on its head. I'm not going into spoilers, but it makes you question everything you've seen and heard so far in the film, and it makes you question everything you see and hear moving forward in the film. And it's really interesting. It's actually quite really... Maybe it's foreshadowed a little too much, but when it actually happens, it really adds something to the film, because it means that you've now got to think about what you've seen and heard, you've now got to think about what you're seeing and hearing. It makes you pay attention much more, and it adds something to the film in a really good way. And because of that, it leaves a lot of room for interpretation. My view on this film and certain events in this film, certain moments in this film, could be completely different to someone else's, and that's really, really impressive. That being said, the film is less than 2 hours long, including the credits, which is a good thing. I don't think a film of this nature should be much longer than that, but there's a lot of momentum, a lot of adrenaline building up in the final third of the film, but before that, some elements do drag a little bit. Not so much that it's bad, but there are certain elements where I think they could have trimmed it down or sped it up a little that would have made it a bit more of a lively film, a bit better paced. And speaking of the ending, without going into spoilers, I do like the ending. The ending is predictable though. Like I said, you know heading into this film what the ending's going to be. And there's a bit more to the ending than I initially thought there would be. And I'm not entirely sure what I thought of that. But it is very dramatic, it is very impactful, and that's what I liked about it. I'm just not sure about some of the specifics, and I'll go into the spoiler territory later on where I get into that. But ultimately, Joker, the story, I always thought was a risky premise. Why would you explore the origins of a character who is so fascinating and interesting when you don't know much about him? One of the things I really like about Joker is that he's meant to be mysterious and ominous and weird and unusual. So to go in and dive into his origins and what makes him that way, it was like, I'm not sure if I want to know that stuff because that might ruin the character. Well, here, it's addressed some of my concerns there in a really good and interesting way, but it's just done a good job of doing it. This is a really good origin story. It is touching on things like The Killing Joke, it is touching on like other films like Taxi Driver and what's the other one, The King of Comedy. So it's bringing in lots of different things from real life, real world stuff like films and so on, as well as different sources from the DC Comics. So it's really interesting how it's picking and choosing and putting together to make a interesting, unique take on the Joker's origins. So ultimately, the risk of exploring this, it works out really well for them. And like I said earlier, this is a new direction for the superhero genre, and I'm really interested in where this is going to go. Is this going to result in us getting a bunch of DC or even Marvel films focusing on the villains, focusing on other characters? Is it going to result in us getting comic book superhero films that aren't action films, that aren't like thrillers, that aren't about saving the world and saving the day, that is much more of a character exploration? If so, I'm all in for that. I'd love to see a Mr. Freeze one, I'd love to see a Clayface one in the style of this. So yeah, hopefully that'll work out. Maybe it won't though, I don't know. The film so far has been a success, so chances are we're going to see either more of Joaquin Phoenix, or some sort of sequel or spin-off to this, or some sort of different take on this with a different character, I don't know. But we're going to see more of this kind of thing going on, I think. And that's good. But now to dive into the characters a bit more. Joaquin Phoenix is Arthur Fleck, the Joker. And he's brilliant. A really good performance. He's going to get an Oscar nomination. I don't think there's much more I can say about that, but the way that he's contorts his body, the way that he moves around and dances, and how he's like hunched over at times, and he has lost a lot of weight, so you can see like his ribs and his bones sticking out of his back and so on. It really makes the character believable, and it shows how much he cares and how much he's wanting this to come across on screen. Just a great performance from him overall. You get a sense that there's stuff going on in your mind, in his mind, but you can never really tell what it is exactly. Not always, at least. One of the really interesting things about his performance, not going into spoilers, is the laugh. The laugh that he does, the Joker laugh, yeah, is given a new interpretation. Not going to say what it is exactly, but the fact that he is laughing and then all of a sudden you'll see him like tapping his chest and so on, and he's like choking. It's painful to him. That's really interesting. I don't think I've ever seen a depiction of Joker, and the fact that the laugh that he's doing is like so painful and it's actually damaging to him. That's a really interesting take on it. But there are other characters in there. Zazie Beetz plays a... I don't want to get into spoilers with her character, but her character is just a plot device. That's disappointing. How essentially the two female characters in this film, Zazie Beetz and his mother, are just plot devices to propel him forward in the story. Other than that, they are a little on the stereotypical side. They are a little one note. So, yeah, a bit under disappointing, but in terms of the story, in terms of what it does and reflection to his character, it works out really well. But maybe they could have just done a little bit more with them. Then you got Robert De Niro playing this TV talk show host who, it's a good performance. He's only in it here and there. He's not a main character, I would say. But his character really does represent the media industry today. How you have got like all these talk show hosts like Jimmy Fallon and I don't know, we don't get a lot of these in the UK, but you've got like Jimmy Fallon coming out and James Corden coming out and basically making like these political jokes, talking about politics and Donald Trump and so on. Robert De Niro is basically channeling all of that in his performance. Yeah, he's doing that, but the Gotham City version. Interesting how it's only Gotham City though. Yeah, it's bizarre how his show seems to be broadcast in Gotham City and shown in Gotham City, but has no relevance anywhere else in the world, so that's interesting. But he ultimately represents the power of media and the power of representation. The fact that there's a point in this film where he shows a clip of a certain character to the whole world, which then embarrasses and humiliates this character. And that's a lot of power to have, especially when the person in the clip had no say in whether this clip was used or not. So yeah, that's really a clear message that, hey, be careful with what you're filming, what you're being portrayed on film, and what you're letting the public see and be aware of. So media, really influential, really powerful. It can affect people's lives. And Robert De Niro totally encapsulates that, and I think it's really quite well done. Then you've got Thomas Wayne, Bruce Wayne's father, representing politics, representing the rich man, representing Mr. Big, who can basically get away with anything he says because he's got so much money. And it's a unique take on Thomas Wayne because usually Thomas Wayne depicted as this like saint of a guy, like a really good guy, gives to charity, good philanthropist and so on. But this Thomas Wayne's a bit more ambiguous. You could totally see him in that light, but there's also room in here to be like, actually no, you are a bit of a douche. So yeah, I like this depiction of Thomas Wayne. He is also a bit on the older side than usual, which not a bad thing, just something to note. And yeah, a good take on this character. But it should be noted that Joaquin Phoenix is in almost every scene of this film. In fact, I don't think there's a single scene that he's not in. So all these side characters really are kind of just popping in here and there to do their thing and kind of leave. Joaquin Phoenix is the only character that's getting a really good fleshing out, which isn't exactly a bad thing. But the film dives into Joaquin Phoenix's Joker character's origins. It works out really well. There's a lot of stuff that's up for interpretation. How much of it is actually there, how much of it isn't there. It dives into paying homage to some of the stuff from before. It dives into some of the stuff that maybe we didn't see coming. And it really leaves a lot there to basically for audiences to look at, to pick apart. And that's really good. It comes across in Joaquin's performance. And yeah, he's going to get an Oscar nomination. So to talk about the production really quickly, the cinematography is really good. The actual mise-en-scène, the set design, the whole location of Gotham City is really, really well realised. The colour palette, how everything is like a muted like browns and murky, muddy colours, how it gives this like a 70s New York grimy, dirty feel, how there is like a lot of corruption and trash like literally all over the place. Like literally every shot of this city and this town, there seems to be some like garbage or graffiti or dirt just lying there, and it really makes this feel like a lived-in real place. And yeah, I would love to see some other films set in this version of Gotham that they've depicted here, because it looks like a fascinating world. And in relation to this, the shots are gorgeous. While yes, the actual locations are dirty and grimy, it is a very picturesque, very beautiful film to watch. It's got great cinematography. I would also say it's well directed, some great shots in there, some great camera angles, good use of movement with the camera, good use of zoom-ins and close-ups and so on to really get the expressions across on Joaquin Phoenix. For the most part, the film is well paced. It does continuously build up as it goes on. There are just one or two little things in like the middle of the first half which I think could have been cut down a little bit or sped up a little, but really minor things there. And this soundtrack is something, and the soundtrack and the score is something I really have to praise. This is a really evocative soundtrack and score. I don't know who done the soundtrack and score here, but it feels like very ominous, very tense at times. It builds up to big, what's the word? It builds up to a big crescendos, particularly towards the end of the film. It does a great job of setting the mood and the tone throughout the film. Really impactful, really dramatic. So yeah, great soundtrack. I think that might get an Oscar nomination as well. But also, not something I usually touch upon, but the sound design as well. Because there are elements in this which are really quiet, there are elements in this which are really loud, and the way in which they differentiate between the two is really quite impressive. So for example, gunshots. When you hear a gunshot in this, it really just pops. It's all of a sudden like bang, huge, loud, and it comes out of nowhere. It adds to the impact of it. It makes it shocking and surprising. It makes guns in this film scary, which is what they should be. So yeah, not many films do this. Usually it's like big bangs and sounds for the sake of excitement, for the sake of adventure or whatever, to actually make things enjoyable. But here it's making them scary. And the gunshots in this film are almost like jump scares in like a horror film. And in many ways, this film is a horror film. Without going into it too much, there are elements in this because it's disturbing, because of the visuals, because of the things that are happening to Arthur Fleck throughout this film. It's almost horror. So that's impressive as well, how it's playing with genre here as well. But that's my thoughts on Joker. I do think it's good. I'm not sure if it's great. I can't quite decide. It's not the masterpiece that I think some people are making out to be, but it's definitely not bad at all. It's better than okay. And just to touch on some of the things that are going on around the world, there's a lot of controversy surrounding this film. A lot of the controversy actually started before people saw this film. Does this film advocate violence? Does this film support gun control and all that lot? I'm not going to dive into that. I think that's up for interpretation. But I do think a lot of the controversy surrounding this film has been exaggerated. This film isn't as dark or depressing or as gruesome as some people are making it out to be. And I don't think there's a lot of controversy in this film to be grabbing onto. So yeah, if you're one of these people who's picked up on a lot of the people that are complaining about this movie, or complaining about some of the stuff on there, I would say see the film for yourself, because a lot of it has been blown out proportion, I think. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Joker. I am going to go into spoilers now. So if you haven't seen the film, go see it, come back, watch the rest of this. If you are going to leave, follow me on Twitter and Instagram first at @the_Grant Burton. But most importantly, subscribe to my channel. If you want more reviews like this, if you want more content like this, if you want more content from me, subscribe. The more subscribers I get, the more I can do that. And I'd really appreciate just any support you want. Let me know in the feedback down below, in the comments down below, what you think of Joker as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts, because this is, I think, going to be a polarizing film. Some people are going to really like it, some people are probably going to really hate it. Personally, I'm like more towards the really liking it side. And now I'm going into full spoilers, so you've been warned. Full spoilers! So I touched upon how Zazie Beetz' character is a plot device. It's a plot device because a lot of the stuff in this film featuring her character didn't actually happen. Because it turns out Arthur Fleck imagined it all. He's delusional. Something he gets from his mother, even though, another spoiler here, his mother's not actually his biological mother, so how did she transfer her craziness, her mental health issues to him? It's a little unclear. Like, maybe they don't have to be inherited, maybe it is something that you live with them and you can pass on, I don't know. I'm not an expert in that. But anyway, Zazie Beetz' character, not there for most of the film, means that half of what we see in the first, like, 2/3 of the film or whatever, didn't actually happen. Or at least it didn't happen in the way that we see it happen. Which then makes you wonder how much of this actually did happen anyway. How much of this was just in his head? How much of it did really take place the way we are seeing it take place? And I think that's a genius thing, because then it makes you want to go back and watch it again and really question, right, is this happening? Is this not happening? Is this in his head? Is this really going on? I don't know. And particularly when it comes to his origins, the fact that we do find out that he was abandoned as a child, how his mum was delusional, how his parents might be Thomas Wayne, but might not. Personally, I don't think they are Thomas Wayne. I think that is just a delusion that was created by his mother, and that he's kind of picked up on. So much of this is, of course, paving its own way, but also paying homage to past comic book interpretations of the character and his origins. But what I really like is that because I want a more mysterious, unknown Joker, that's totally a possibility here. Everything we learned about the Joker in this film could be completely false and wrong, and at the end of the day we might still not know anything about him. And I love that that's a possibility, because this Joker, this character, should be mysterious in my eyes, and by making everything so unclear and unknown, that adds to that, and I think that's brilliant. But speaking of the Thomas Wayne stuff, when that was first presented, well, firstly, I thought that everything his mother was saying was delusional anyway. I totally clocked on that she was not quite right. I knew that it wasn't just a case of like Alzheimer's or dementia or whatever. I knew that there was something else going on there. So when she came up with this whole "I'm writing letters to Thomas Wayne" thing, I'm like, no, you're not. You're just being stupid. You're not writing letters to anyone here. And it turns out, yes, she was writing letters to Thomas Wayne, but she wasn't actually getting them sent to Thomas Wayne, it didn't seem. And when it was presented that, Thomas Wayne could be Arthur Fleck's dad, I was like, please don't do this. This is so cheesy, so on the nose, it's so unnecessary. I'm glad that eventually it turned out that there was the potential for interpretation, yeah. Was Thomas Wayne Joker's dad? I would say no. Maybe I'm being stubborn, maybe I just don't want it to be Thomas Wayne's dad, I don't know, but personally I don't think Thomas Wayne is his dad. And I love that there's the option there that it's up for interpretation. But again, when it was first introduced, I thought that was a bit silly, but it worked out really well in the end. And of course, this is a unique take on the Joker's origin story, but it is drawn from certain DC comics, particularly towards the latter end of the movie, when it does tie into Batman's origins, when you do see the murder of his parents in Crime Alley. So I felt a lot of this stuff was forced and unnecessary. Why does Joker's origins have to be so closely connected to Batman's origins? Yes, it gives them a stronger bond, it makes them their, not hatred for each other, but their rivalry with each other, how they are the sworn enemies of one another. It makes their relationship much more interesting and adds to that, which I kind of like it, but it's also a case of don't credit Joker with everything, you know. In the comic books, it's usually Joe Chill that kills Batman's parents, and here it was a complete unknown person. We don't know if it was Joe Chill or not, but he was like wearing a Joker mask and so on. So yeah, I'm a little unsure of how I feel about how Bruce Wayne's origins as Batman was so closely linked to Joker's origins. But yeah, I could totally see it working out really well if they decide to go into like a sequel. Maybe the Robert Pattinson movie, which is set like 10, 20 years after this, could be a sequel of sorts. Although at that point, Joaquin Phoenix's Joker would probably be a little on the older side. So while they were forced, I thought it was ultimately pretty well done. So this is all about Joker's origins. What you're going to get from this film is a lot of people saying, is Joaquin Phoenix the best Joker? Is Heath Ledger? Is Jack Nicholson? Is Cesar Romero? Notice how I'm not mentioning Jared Leto. He's not even in the running. But yeah, a lot of people are going to be saying, who's the best Joker? I don't think it's fair to put Joaquin Phoenix in a ranking of that sort, because he's a very different version of the Joker. His Joker is much more grounded, much more realistic, even more so than Heath Ledger's. And also, the fact that he doesn't really become Joker until right at the end means that for most of this film, he's not actually the Joker. He's not the Joker that we would just usually see as the Joker. So I don't think it's fair to put Joaquin Phoenix in a ranking of that sort. But it's a brilliant performance nonetheless, a great, well-realised character in this film. Will Joaquin Phoenix Joker end up in a Batman movie? Todd Phillips has said that he doesn't plan on doing any sequels. Joaquin Phoenix has said maybe. So I don't know. Joaquin Phoenix doesn't usually do franchise movies. He doesn't usually do sequels of this nature. Personally, I think this version of the Joker is everything he does in this film is a little stupid. He's not the smartest guy around, and he's not the most capable guy. A lot of the things that are actually happening here seem to be happening by chance and by luck. The fact that he is getting away from the cops on the train, for example, or later in the film, that's simply a complete coincidence how he does go through the crowds, how the crowds turn on the cops. That just works out in his favour. And in this film, he's killing people because these people have wronged him. Everyone who dies in this film, at least I think, unless I'm missing someone out, everyone who dies in the film has wronged him in some form, with maybe one exception at the end. So he's very calculated, very specific about who he's killing and what he's doing, which means he has a certain degree of intelligence. By the end of this film, everything he's set out to do has been accomplished. And that leaves the point of like, if he comes back, if Joaquin Phoenix comes back as this version of the Joker, why would he be Batman's villain? Yeah, maybe Batman wants revenge on him or something, I don't know, but then that's delving into a whole different argument, so I'll avoid that. But I don't think I need to see this version of the Joker again. I don't think I want to see this version of the Joker again. I feel like this version of the Joker has came out to do what he accomplished, and it's done, and he's been captured and so on. And it's also to say that if he were to go against Batman in a film, this version of the Joker shows that he's not exactly the most physically capable or strong or whatever. Depending on their depiction of Batman, I don't think he would stand a chance. So it's like, I don't think he would be much of a threat to Batman. I don't think he would be much of a foe to Batman. Another thing about the film is there are certain leaps in logic, certain leaps in events, because there are things going on in the background. There are the whole things with the riots and the protests about the whole divide between the rich and the poor and how there's corruption in Gotham and so on. Because we see so much of this film from the viewpoint of Arthur Fleck, this stuff's going on in the background. We're not really seeing it progress, which means that from the beginning of the film to the end of the film, there seems to be a huge jump somewhere, and it ends up being Arthur Fleck ends up being the main, like the match thrown on the gasoline, it seems, to propel this forward. And it feels a little forced. It feels a little too quick in certain places. And so by the end of the film, there's a huge riot going on, and everyone's hailing him as like their hero and leader and so on. And it just feels like that seems so rushed into. It feels like there should have been like one or two scenes in the middle of the film that really fleshed out the progressive nature of the riots and the protests going on in Gotham, and that would have like added to it a bit. And it also, I think, it needed to explore the idea of the Joker as like the match on the gasoline kind of thing, the thing propelling everyone forward a bit more. But yeah. This is the one area which I was really kind of think needed to be fleshed out more. And because of that, they don't fully make that much sense when you really think about it. It makes a very enjoyable, very good film. I use the word enjoyable loosely. But yeah, just some of the more political stuff that's going on in the background and how that relates to Arthur Fleck is a little on the iffy side, and you've kind of just got to like, just accept it for what it is. But yeah, that's all my thoughts on Joker. I do think it's a good film. I do recommend you go see it and get an opinion for yourself. Ignore the controversy surrounding it. Ignore what everyone else is saying about it. I do think it's important that you experience it for yourself, because a lot of the stuff has been blown out of proportion, I think. And yeah. I'm Grant Burton. Follow me on Twitter, so on, and subscribe to my channel. Yada yada yada, you know the drill. Thanks for watching.